members to round up, but here we all are. And we will call to order the joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for this Tuesday, September 12, 2017. May I please have a roll call?
Councilmember Skillman.
Here.
Councilmember Delasso.
Here.
Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Landman.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
And with that, there's been so much tragedy happening in the last week or so. So if we could all please have a moment of silence for all those that have had tragedy happen to them with all of the natural disasters, I would appreciate that. Thank you. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, thank you. We have approval of the minutes and notice of waiving of reading of all resolutions and ordinances introduced and or adopted under this agenda.
Move to approve.
And second? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Let that show a 5-0 vote. And with that, we will move on to the announcements. The City of Cotati has special open office hours on Monday evenings from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. by appointment in the Community Development Department at City Hall as part of its Cotati Open for Business program. This program provides personalized assistance and information to developers, current Cotati business owners, and those interested in starting a new business within the city. The Rohnert Park Cotati Regional Library hosts events for all ages, including art exhibits, book clubs, and children's programs. All events are free and open to the public. For more information, call the library at 584-9121 or visit www.sonomalibrary.org. The Cotati Historical Society Museum is open regularly the second Tuesday of each month from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., Saturdays from 1 to 4 p.m., and by appointment. For more information, call 707-794-0305. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up at nixle.com, Nixle.com. The city offers a variety of recreation programs for all ages. See details on the web at cotaticity.org. With that, we will move on to proclamations. We have two this evening. Our first one is proclamation of the City Council of City Cotati declaring September 22nd through 28th Falls Prevention Awareness Week. And I believe Dana is here. So. Good evening. So, here we go. Proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati declaring September 22nd through 28th, 2017 as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Whereas falls are a leading cause of injuries requiring hospitalization or treatment and injury-related deaths in California, with the vast majority of these occurring among older individuals. And whereas falls are preventable when education, awareness, and interventions are put in place. Whereas the nationally ranked evidence-based A Matter of Balance program is sponsored by the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging with partner agencies and trained volunteers to raise seniors' confidence about their balance and increase their activity levels to reduce risk of falls. Whereas since A Matter of Balance began in Sonoma County, approximately 1,250 older adults have participated in classes taught throughout the county. 137 sessions have been provided by 19 volunteer coaches serving 154 seniors in fiscal year 2016-17. Whereas injuries from falls are a community health problem with many organizations, agencies, healthcare providers, and individuals working to raise awareness, provide resources to prevent falls, and help those who suffer from complications from falls. Whereas the first day of fall prevention, September 22nd, 2017, has been declared National Falls Prevention Awareness Day, and the 2017 theme is 10 years standing together to prevent falls. And whereas by legislative resolution of 2008, California has established the first week of fall as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Now therefore be it proclaimed on this 12th of September 2017 by the City Council of the City of Cotati that this week of September 22nd through 28th, 2017 is proclaimed as Falls Prevention Awareness Week in Cotati. And would you like to share some comments with us?
Yes, I am the coordinator for the County of Sonoma of Matter of Balance, and I'm also a resident of Cotati. I have been a volunteer leader for 5 years with the program, and in that time I'm going to kind of focus on the positive here. While falls are the leading cause of injury in adults 65 and older, and a third of 65 and older adults in any given year will fall and injure themselves. The good news is that falls can be prevented, and through a process of awareness and building confidence, both physically and psychologically, and with a process of peer support, knowing that they are not alone, that many people, most of us, experience some fall in our lifetime, they're able to realize some empowerment. And I have seen many older adults who have come into the program greatly incapacitated, physically and mentally, isolated, depressed, and simply with an experience of understanding the strategies and the resources that are available to them, and most of them are internal, they realize that they can adapt. And that's part of what aging is all about, successful aging is being able to adapt to the context, to the adventure that we kind of meet every day. And so I'm very happy and proud that Cotati is proclaiming the 22nd through the 28th as Falls Prevention Awareness. We have done some programs here in Cotati, Charles Street in particular, and I was a leader of that program. And I saw individuals who were afraid to walk on the sidewalks because they were uneven, the pavement was uneven, realized through some brainstorming with other people in the class that there were other avenues that they could take. And in fact, some new pavement that had been put down, and the new crosswalks, particularly across East Cotati there. And I had one individual actually resume a visit that she would do every morning with friends to get coffee. She had stopped doing that and was missing that quality of life very much, and she was able to resume that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
No, thank you, Dana. I think that's great. A lot of people I think don't realize unless they're personally affected by people with falls, and I currently have an 89-year-old mother-in-law who isolates herself because of the fear of falling. So that's a wonderful program, and it's good to know that it's out there, and I'm glad the local citizen was able to utilize the re-engineered sidewalks.
Yes.
Thank you. That's good work.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to echo my colleague. I think this is very, very important work. I think we take it for granted. We don't take perhaps a fall as serious as we should, but I do remember in my younger career with the fire department that falls for older people often cause broken hips. And for those people, many of them, that was the end of mobility in their life.
Yeah.
That, even as a younger person who perhaps didn't understand the gravity of things as much as many of us should have, that way, well, that was pretty obvious. That's a big thing. So anything you can do to help people avoid that, and I particularly appreciate the story about being able to let people adapt,
Yes.
face the challenges of getting older, and find ways to continue to enjoy their life. I think
Yeah.
that's wonderful work, so thank you.
Okay. Wendy?
I'll just echo as well, thank you for the work that you do in the volunteer efforts to help people keep aware and also just to stay connected with people. I think a lot of times when you lose touch with community and don't realize you're not alone, you're not the only one dealing with these issues, I think that's great to be able to get those connections in place. So thank you for your work.
And again, just thank you for the work you do. I think plain and simple, it's really important. And I know that I'm probably not too far off from maybe needing some of that assistance myself, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said, to be able to adapt to the changes. It's one thing we all will do as age, and it's, how gracefully we do that, adapting. And it isn't always easy, and we don't always know what it is that, we're going to lose. My mother-in-law happens to be in a facility, and a lot of times it's the little things that they do with folks like balance classes and, bocce ball and things like that kind of, number one, gives them the interaction, but two, also helps with their balance and helps with their confidence and things. So yes, thank you for all that you do, and we would be happy to come down and take a photo with you.
Okay, great.
We would.
Okay, we have a second proclamation this evening, and that proclamation is Pollution Prevention Week. I believe Dustin is here to accept this proclamation, if you want to step on up. Thank you. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Cotati proclaiming the week of September 18th through 24th as Pollution Prevention Week and the week of September 16th through 24th as Creek Week. Whereas throughout the United States, the week starting the third Monday of September is recognized as National Pollution Prevention Week, and whereas throughout much of California, including the Russian River watershed, cities, counties, and other stewardship organizations are recognizing the third week of September as Creek Week. And whereas our pollution prevention practices are intrinsically linked to the health of our watershed lands and waterways, and whereas the Russian River Watershed Association supports programs to reduce pollution, increase the environmental quality of our watershed, and provide our communities with the knowledge to be effective stewards of the Russian River watershed lands and waterways. And whereas the nearly 1,500 square miles of lands, 150 creeks, and approximately 350,000 residents of the Russian River watershed are connected and mutually support each other, and whereas the Russian River, along with its tributaries and associated features, are important resources to the people of Sonoma and Mendocino counties, and whereas pollution in the form of trash and debris, chemicals from industry and everyday living, and sediment from construction and many land uses and activities all have the potential to degrade the quality of life, the quality of the resources within the Russian River watershed. Whereas the Russian River Watershed Association strives to protect our lands and waterways through ongoing pollution prevention outreach, which aims to raise awareness of the harmful effects of pollutants to our natural systems. And whereas during Pollution Prevention Week and Creek Week, Creek, river, and ocean cleanup campaigns will take place throughout Sonoma and Mendocino counties. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed on this September 12, 2017, by the City Council of the City of Cotati that the week of September 18th through 24th is Pollution Prevention Week, and the week of September 16th through September 24th as Creek Week, and asks all members of our community to support efforts to protect and enrich our watershed health by participating in the many Pollution Prevention Week, Creek Week activities, and to take active steps to reduce pollution and care for our environment through the year. So would you like to share a few words, Dustin?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor and the rest of the council, for proclaiming Creek Week, September 16th through the 24th. As you mentioned, kind of echoing that, we've got an activity on Saturday. It's going to be from 9 until 1 p.m. We'll be meeting at the Cotati Historic Lot number 2 off Lakewood Avenue, and essentially walking the Cotati Creek in order to collect, sort, and track the trash that we collect. I will say I run on that pathway quite frequently. I haven't seen much, but it's not a matter of how much we're collecting. It's the fact that we're practicing citizen science and using our cell phones and an application created by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA abbreviated, to create a supporting baseline of data collected for future Creek Week cleanups and compared to in the future. So we're kind of thinking ahead, but once again, the stormwater pollution work that you folks do is outstanding, and I haven't seen too much, but once again, it's about practicing good citizen science. So thank you very much. We are still looking for one more guest speaker, so if anybody's available to join us, you folks are celebrities out here, so we'd appreciate it greatly. And then we also, if you can't attend, we have a fermentation workshop the following days in Cotati, so we're doing a lot out here and really trying to diversify our program, so thank you.
Thank you. I'll start this way this time. How's that? Wendy?
No, but thank you very much for all the efforts that you make to protect the local environment. And as we all know, it's all interconnected with everything else. So everything we can do here locally helps ripple out. So thank you very much. And thank you for letting us know about different events in the area. Appreciate that.
John?
Dustin, I have to say the last few weeks at work, I've been overwhelmed and doing nothing but trying to figure out and organize coastal cleanup stuff. Because I know this Saturday is the coastal cleanup for the state of California, and there's activities going on all over the place. We have 2 different cleanups going on. In October, there's another one that goes on in West Marin. It just seems like this is all we're doing anymore is cleaning up. But you're right. I mean, I've noticed in the Laguna behind my house over the years, for 30 years that I've lived there, it used to be I would be out there for hours just picking up litter for the most part, and you know it's getting tougher and tougher. That's a great problem to have, honestly. Right? Yeah. So let's hope you find very little garbage and whatever else might need to be picked up out of there. So thanks for all you guys, everything you do too.
John?
I would just echo the same thing. I think the transformation along that creek has been tremendous. I did have a question regarding the Pollution Week versus the Creek Week, and the Pollution Week is 2 days longer, and the Creek Week's 2 days less?
We're just playing to the national theme here, you know. I didn't set it.
No, I think you guys do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, Dustin, thank you very much for bringing this to us. Creek Week, Pollution Week, I think the two go together. We should have made it Creek and Pollution half a month perhaps, or something like that, because they really work very well together. I think many people in this room have been involved at one point or another in some sort of creek cleanup, and it is amazing. Once you do that, you cannot imagine the amount of things that get in there. And I agree. I think we've seen improvements throughout the county, particularly here along the Laguna in recent years. But if you take a look, every time you clean right by where the storm drain is empty out, that's where it all comes. And that's what I think is the value of what you do, because that public education, there's still so many people that don't understand that whatever goes in that storm drain is probably going to wind up right in the Laguna.
It doesn't go away.
Yeah, we think it magically goes away. It's treated, filtered, and cleaned, and unfortunately it just doesn't. So I think there's a lot of value in what you do, so thank you for that.
Yeah, just to tag on to that, I think that that's one of the most important aspects of you is categorizing and having the data there, because it's that data that helps both us as policymakers and some other agencies as policymakers to kind of know, well, what's out there, what do we need to go after as far as education, and as well as, bans. One of the things that people talk about a lot is styrofoam, and I know that
That and
that's
cigarette
one
butts
that,
in it, too.
yeah, so it's kind of knowing what is out there. It helps us know what it is that we need to manage better.
And I also want to thank Craig Scott and Public Works. They're going to have somebody, I believe it's their day off too, and they're going to have somebody out there helping us bring in recycling and trash bins and stuff. So we couldn't do it without all of you.
Right, thank you. And with that, we'll come down for a photo op.
Yeah, maybe extra, they don't have to show this.
Yeah, I don't know. That's way more water. Yeah. Find it.
Okay, with that, we will move on to presentations. We have an update on the current activities at the Marin Sonoma Mosquito and Vector Control District. And we have coming right back, huh, Justin?
Can't get enough.
That's okay.
We're not going to do a photo op on this one, are we?
No, I don't think so. He doesn't get a photo op for this.
Mosquitoes aren't there. Awesome. Well, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to provide sort of an annual brief overview of what we do over at the Marin Sonoma Mosquito Vector Control District. It's quite a mouthful, but that's why we use the abbreviation. So I'm going to try and keep it short, and then if anybody has any questions about some of the data that's shown or maps or any of that, we can share the presentation and the district manager's contact information at the end. So you guys have a very busy agenda, so I'm going to mind that.
Tech support.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, we just brought in the heavy guns.
Okay. Vanna.
When they say city manager, that encompasses a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second.
Ooh, close now. Ah, yay. Good job, team.
Team effort, right? Awesome. So once again, very brief overview. This includes most of the most recent data of some of the service requests that the district's taking. To quickly highlight visually, on the bottom, existing district, Marin County, that's where it initially began as a district, and then it expanded to the little bit lighter, it's a little bit easier to tell in this, but then it expanded to the existing district in Sonoma County, and then it actually expands much further into the gray area, I believe since 2004, once they discovered West Nile virus somewhere around in these areas. So carrying on, the district, we have a very large governing board, 24 members, and typically we meet the second Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. I serve as the trustee for the city of Cotati. I'm very fortunate to do so. Here's our mission statement. I'm not going to read it word for word, but it came to late last year by the district when they held a public workshop with the community and generated the mission statement you see here. Different services that are provided, they have many different programmatic areas they fulfill, but essentially some of the core ones are public education, outreach and control of the mosquito population, and disease surveillance. That's the big ticket right there. So they have a very robust integrated vector management program. As an environmental studies major, I thought I knew a lot going into it. It is well past my head, and these folks are doing very, very intense work, but fulfilling nonetheless. For those that don't know, a working definition of a vector is any organism that carries and transmits an infectious pathogen to another living organism. Worldwide, they are responsible for over 1 million deaths each year. So this has been 4 years in the making, but this is the program impact report, environmental impact report, that the district needs to have in order to fulfill and essentially qualify the programs that they're offering. This is kind of just highlighting the program itself in different areas of expertise they have. There's about 17 field technicians, 6 seasonal staff, 2 field supervisors who are supported by a well-equipped lab and a small group of admin staff. That is a mosquito, zoomed in. So just quickly calling out some of the diseases here. The West Nile virus. Although Zika recently has grabbed many headlines, West Nile virus is endemic to this area, fortunately at a very low rate, but there have been human cases of the disease in prior years. Continuing on here, so this is just a short statistic of one type of the service request they take is assessing dead birds found in Sonoma County, particularly from the crow family as well as the western scrub jay, as you see. I will call out quickly, no human cases in Sonoma County last year, which is huge. So here are some of the local threats we have. The one in the bottom right, these names are tough, but Aedes albopictus, that's the one that essentially, their populations vary by season as well as locality, but these are the ones that are going to potentially carry the Zika virus, and in some cases West Nile. So keep an eye out for those and run or swat them if you see them. This is sort of the visual map. They have trucks that go all throughout Marin and Sonoma counties, and a lot of these are known sources, but there have been a number of new service requests. At the bottom, it looks like there's a little bit of a note there, but continuing on, this is just some of the district activity, most recent up-to-date since August 31st. What I'm learning from the district manager is that this is quite a busy year for the district, and a record number of requests were handled in 2016, but they're already projecting that it's going to be more this year, probably due to the heavy rains this past winter. So furthermore, once again, just heavy rainfall, standing waters, the big kicker. There's a good visual we had in here, but it didn't make it to the final slide. But standing gardening pots, wheelbarrows, just about anything. I believe it takes about like an inch of standing water for mosquitoes to start to breed and just be threatening. So additional vectors include rodents. So you can call them if you have any rodent problems. They can either give you advice as well as send somebody out there to assess it if it's dead and you don't want to touch it, which we highly recommend you don't do. Ticks are another one, so high grasses, make sure that you're always giving yourself a tick check as well as animals. I didn't bring my key ring, but you can actually buy a tick key ring that pops them off pretty easily. In the past, some people would use a lighter to burn them off or something because they latch on pretty strong, but these tick keys are about $1 a piece, so I recommend that. This is just more testing results. The bottom right, 2.6% is the prevalence rate that they're starting to recognize. Some of the parks and trails in these areas potentially will carry a disease, but there are hotspots where basically a hotspot is an unknown area, and you discover it, you do some testing, whether that's rodents, ticks, mosquitoes. So we try to keep the hotspots down, but these happen in vernal pools, and with seasonal heavy rainfall, new ones can always come up. But 2.6, we want to keep that as low as possible. So this graph basically visualizes the percent of ticks specifically collected and found to be positive for a bacterium that causes Lyme disease. So Annandale, Crane Creek, Foothill, take the photo, share it with your friends. Just be very careful when you're touring to these places, because that's kind of the biggest issue. Is a lot of people like to travel, especially during summer months, and they come back here and they may or may not have got a disease that they didn't know about. So they also do public outreach, featured in Press Democrat. They recently had a story about the vector rodent, and I believe their number of service request calls spiked after that one. So it's all about public outreach and just really focusing on prevention in the local communities. And this is their fleet. So this is one of the more impressive things that I've noticed, is that they have a welder on site that welds basically all of their machinery that they use. And I was fortunate enough to attend a conference in San Diego with all the other districts in California, and we are one of the leading innovators of the machines that we use due to the diverse range and landscapes that we have to deal with. So I was pretty blown away with this, and that's a brief overview of some of the work that the district does. If anybody's interested in calling them, they also give out, I believe, free mosquito fish that eat them, and you can just throw them in a little wine barrel or recycled grade barrel or any of that type of stuff, and they'll kind of help keep down mosquito levels in your backyard. So that's a free service. So thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Dustin, I had read many years ago that both Marin and Sonoma County, as opposed to Mendocino County, had a significantly lower rate of at least ticks that had the spirochete, the Lyme disease in it. Is that still sort of true? Do you know? You don't have
Because
to.
I'm not a technician, I don't want to say like yeah or no. I'd rather just talk to Phil about that, and
Okay.
I can ask him particularly if that evidence holds true today.
Well, I'm kind of curious because what was discovered scientifically over the years was that the western western fence lizard, a lot of people call it blue-bellied because it's got the blue stripes on its belly, very common.
Kind of like you tonight, right?
Kind of like me tonight, thank you. Yeah, that's why I wore this, of course. That because there's so many of those in Marin and Sonoma, oh no, I'm going to get even with him one day, that's fine. But because there's so many of those lizards in Marin and Sonoma, that they've counted up to 50 ticks on one lizard. Those lizards aren't very big, and ticks are really small too, but when you magnify it, you can actually see them all like right around the throat.
That's insane.
But when that spirochete from an infected tick goes into the lizard, and they can re-ingest it, but it's dead at that point in time. So that tick is then no longer infected with the disease, which is a very interesting concept. And it's true that those lizards are not as common in Mendocino County. So there was some discrepancy. I want to say it was like 2% Marin Sonoma, which those numbers seem to hold somewhat true, but Mendocino was like 25% of ticks collected and tested were found to have that. So
It's scary.
yeah, I mean, I was curious if that was still true. I'm sure at some level it is, but
You can talk to Phil, and then I can shoot you an email offline.
sounds great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Other questions?
Our area has a lot of deer mice that are prone.
Not as much as other areas. I believe Pengrove areas and potentially Rohnert Park, since it's bordered up against that, might have some more. But once again, I could go back to the data, but not being a technician, I'm not going to make those general assumptions.
And working in the workers' comp world, I've had a couple clients that have died from the hantavirus, from deer mice droppings. So it's something to be concerned with. And then the other question I had was, I understand that the vector control district will go out and assist with wasp and hornet
yellow
removal,
jackets.
and there's no differentiation between if they burrow in the ground or if they're up in the rafters of a home?
Yeah, the ones that we have on display, and I encourage anybody in the audience to come and tune into one of our public meetings, but they put out all the stuff that they have that they take to their kids' programs, and the ones that I believe are the ones carrying these particular diseases, yellow jackets, are the ones that burrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got a good example in a glass case of a burrow tunnel system, and it's pretty complex actually, but those are the ones I've noticed. So.
Thank you.
And they are amazing. It's such a surprise when you get bitten. You have to wait a day to see just how bad it's going to actually be. But I actually wanted to give a credit to the district for something you've actually helped us with a couple of times in the years past, and that's the rodent control vector aspect of it. And occasionally we will get a complaint from somebody in the public. Perhaps it's a renter dealing with a landlord, some back and forth, they're unsatisfied perhaps with the efforts. And it's nice having you guys as a resource. And I know that staff's always able to get you to come out and help, and really gets both sides to be able to say, okay, here's some common ground here, and things seem to go better once you help with that. So just wanted to call that out and thank you for it.
Thank you.
Nothing else? Then thank you so much. Thank you for the update.
No problem.
So with that, we will move on to approval of the final agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No proposed changes, Mayor.
Okay. With that, then, we will move on to citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. Any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any items listed on the consent calendar or any matter not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to the City Council Policy 2017-2, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend time for a reasonable time where a disability accommodation has been requested. Do we have any cards? We have no speaker cards for that. Anyone wishing to speak? George? Yes.
Good evening, Council. For the benefit of the audience and our folks watching from home tonight, my name is George Barrich. I'm a former city councilman here in Cotati. And normally, we webcast these meetings to the public. We've been doing this for a couple of years now. And that includes video and audio, but unfortunately at the last city council meeting, the webcast did not include the audio. I thought there was something wrong with my phone, so I didn't bother, but there was no audio being web streamed, and I understand my neighbor, Cotati citizen Lori Alderman, took it upon herself to come down to City Hall and notify the council through the city clerk, who's not here tonight, Laura's not here tonight, that there was no audio, so that you and your infinite wisdom could take appropriate steps, whether to take a brief recess, try to solve the problem, and so forth. So she comes down, as the story goes. She walks in, she comes up to Laura's desk, the city clerk, and she hunches down over and says, "Excuse me," and Laura accordingly told her to shush. It would not talk to her. And Lori was very upset about this. And she was not feeling well enough to come to the meeting anyway, but she drug herself out to come down here to assist the city and let them know that she is a tax-paying citizen and many other people could not view the meeting from home. And she was shushed. I don't think that's policy here in Cotati to do that to citizens. I'm sure if it was the late Prue Draper, no one would do that to her. But the fact is that these are city meetings. These are government meetings, but they're also quasi-public meetings in the sense that the public is very much a part of these meetings. We're here to assist you and be part of the process and to participate. This is a joint effort. And when you have a citizen come in to try to assist the city in something like this, and she gets shushed, this is a crisis, and this should be a wake-up call. Had there been a medical emergency in the room and somebody came up and said so-and-so is having a problem, are they going to get shushed? I really would like you folks, because I think down deep you're concerned about this, I want you to investigate this. Find out how this happens. I know Lori Alderman does not always agree with you. She, as a fellow Democrat, she will criticize you. She has common sense. She has her disabilities and so forth, but the fact is, I think that she was either singled out here, or it sounds like she was singled out as being some kind of troublemaker coming in here and trying to make a mention to the city clerk that there's a problem with your audio. And I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for Lori. I'm embarrassed for the city council, because people don't need to be treated that way. She didn't barge in here. She didn't disrupt anything. She could have went up to the city manager. She could have went up to the city attorney. She could have went up to the police chief. But I think proper procedure is she came up to the city clerk. And she did due diligence in trying to make you aware of this. And I think it should shock your conscience. No matter what you might want to say about Lori, she does not deserve that kind of treatment, to be shushed. And God help you if you try to shush me. But the fact is, please investigate this. Now, Mayor, I would like to speak on consent item D, but I would prefer to see if the council's going to pull this item before I speak on it, because I would be interested to hear your thoughts about item D before I speak on it. Is that okay? Can I sit down and see if you pull the item?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will allow that. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on citizens' business or the consent calendar? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent calendar. Is anybody wishing to pull any of the items?
I'll move to approve.
Yes, we'll let you speak. It doesn't sound like anyone's pulling them, so please come up.
Thank you. Members of the council, I want to take a walk down memory lane about this original project of these vehicle charging stations. This project was brought to you a few years back under the city manager, Diane Thompson. And it was delegated, I believe, to city engineer Damien Obid at the time to do the full report. And I was there that night for the meeting, and I listened to the report, and it was a very good report, but the citizens had some questions. And one of my questions was, who is going to pay for this electricity that the citizens are using at these charging stations? And Mr. Obid went on to say, well, yes, the citizens are going to pay for the electricity. And I further asked, how is this going to be done? Is there going to be a credit card swipe at the charging station? How is this going to work? And he specifically said, no, I think this is going to be done through the office. You'll come into the water office or something and pay or put your credit card down. Or, I don't know. I was assured that the taxpayers were not going to be paying for the electricity for all the vehicles being charged at that station. Well, obviously that has not been the case. As far as I understand, the citizens, the city, are paying for that electricity, and that was not part of the staff report at the time. I felt that this has been a fraud being perpetrated against the public about this. I would like you to look into this. That was not the intent of these stations, is to have the taxpayer fit the bill for people to charge their cars every day or at night for weeks and years on end. So I would ask you if you can clarify that for the public on who's paying for this electricity and why this was not part of the original staff report, or why the citizens were misled, because I specifically brought those questions before staff and the city council, and I do feel like I was misled. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I believe this item has to do with permitting of charging stations, not the charging stations that the city has. So it's two different things. So am I correct in that assumption? Okay. So with that, anyone else wishing to speak on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will close public comment on the consent calendar. And
So we have a motion.
there is a motion.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Let that show a 5-0 vote for items 10A, B, C, D. And then we will move on to direction on future agenda items. Anybody have any future agenda items? Oops, sorry, I set my timer. Didn't know it was going to give noise. Sorry, that timer wasn't working, and I wanted to be sure that. Okay. Future agenda items?
I was about to ask for more
Sorry.
jaunty music, but you've taken
Sorry.
care of that, so I'm good for tonight.
Okay. Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to public hearings. or you'll have to bear with me here because this one is a little unique and it has some very special way of doing it. So, this is the time and place for the public hearing regarding the proposed formation of the Community Facilities District Number 2017-1. Will the Deputy City Clerk please confirm that she has received the following items in regard to this public hearing? 1, a proof of publication of the notice of this hearing. B, certificate regarding registered voters confirming that there are no registered voters living within the boundaries of the proposed CFD. C, a certificate regarding ownership of land confirming that the Colvin Group Fund 1 LP is the sole owner of the subject property. And D, Community Facilities District report pertaining to the proposed CFD number 2017-1.
Yes, I received these items.
Okay. Before hearing from the public, may we please have a staff report for this item?
Certainly. Mayor, members of the council, Craig Scott, City Engineer, Public Works Director. With me tonight to help answer any questions you may have after the presentation is Nathan Perez from David Tossig and Associates, who prepared the fiscal impact analysis report and helped guide us through this process. And then Sam Sperry, who is under contract with Myers-Nave. Thank you. So this is very similar to the presentation provided at the initiation of the CFD back in July. And this is the outline, which just goes through what is a CFD and proposed initiation, which we did back in July. The public services covered, we'll be talking about that a little bit, and the rate and method of apportionment study, and finally the process to establish the CFD, which will get us back into what actions we need to take tonight. When a new development comes along, there's a fiscal deficit that's created, which is the difference between the revenues generated or the city collects through its portion of the property taxes and the public services provided to that development. And so the city has turned to the Mello-Roos Act to help plug this deficit, and that act provides us the authority and the methodology to form the community facilities districts. With the CFD, we can levy special taxes within the CFD boundary for these public services, and only new development is being proposed to be annexed into the CFD. So the next slide shows the map that following the initiation, we went ahead and at that meeting this body approved this boundary map. We recorded it with the county, so it is a recorded document at this point. And what it is it shows the initial boundary of the CFD, which are these 3 lots, and then it shows the proposed or the future annexation area, which includes undeveloped properties that we would bring in under this expedited process, because it would be typically 1 or 2, very limited property owners at that point before development. So the next one's those 3 lots. This would be the initial CFD boundary or district, and then the other one is just the future annexation area, which is the corporate boundary of the city. The public services are listed here. Mainly, they're the 3 sort of 4 from the bottom: police protection services, maintenance and lighting of parks, parkways, streets, roads, and open space, flood and storm protection services. So these are services that this development would have benefit from, and the tax would help us recover those expenses. Now, we did have a fiscal analysis and impact study completed for this, which went to calculate those expenses on a dwelling unit basis, and this is what we came up with. and these are the same numbers that were presented at the initiation back in July. Just point out that we as a city can adjust these annually, and without going back to an election, we can just do that internally, administratively. We can continue to adjust these on an annual basis, and then they're only going to be assessed to developed properties. So at this point, those properties are vacant, and upon issuance of a building permit, we would then submit that assessment roll to the county, and there's anywhere between a 9 and a 13-month delay before it turns up on the assessment records, or it actually shows up as a bill. And this is actually industry practice. Some cities do choose to back it up to the final app approval, and anything later than the building permit gets the city into a little bit of an awkward situation, because with the delay, it could be occupied, and then all of a sudden, it's a surprise to get this assessment on the tax bill a year after, the resident's been there, it's been occupied. So this timing actually works out to coincide with that occupancy, so it's all known and can be worked into the rent of these apartments ahead of time, so there's no surprises. Okay, so the process now to establish, back on July 25th, as I've mentioned, we did all of those actions, and following that, we've, as I mentioned, recorded the boundary map, and we put out a notice of this public hearing, and then we obtained key documents from the sole property owner that would allow us to then proceed with the next steps, which are the ones we're doing tonight, holding the public hearing, considering a resolution to form the CFD, providing ourselves conditional authority to levy the taxes, and then after that, call for a special mailed ballot election, and then hold the election. These are all separate resolutions. And then finally, levy the special tax through an ordinance. Now, it can't be done through a resolution because the Mello-Roos Act actually says it must be done by an ordinance. And there's a specific order of these. Let's see. So the recommendation is to go forward with these resolutions and the ordinance in that order. And that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Are there any questions or comments? Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. When we had addressed this earlier, we had talked about the timing and the requirements of initiating this upon the issuance of the permits. In that time period that you talked about, 9 to 13 months, is that inherent with just Sonoma County, or is that a statewide average? Do you know?
That is typical of a county assessment process in that it's done once a year. For us, it's August 10th, I think is the deadline. Mm-hmm. And so we're backing that up to May 1st to give us time to process it. So typically we would take all the building permits issued within the 12 months prior to May 1st, bundle them all up so that we streamline our administrative, or lower our administrative costs, and then submit that to the county. And so depending on the timing of when you get if a building permit's issued April 30th, they would, I guess, have the shortest length of time between then and December when it shows up on their tax bill. But someone submitting it May 1st would get 13 months before it would show up on the tax bill.
So if a permit were issued in this particular situation in October, we probably wouldn't see anything on those tax rolls until December of 2018.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
No questions? Yes.
I do have a question. So, Mr. Scott, I'm looking for here, I wrote it down. Purpose of adjusting. I'm trying to formulate my question here. So, you talked about the possibility of adjusting the tax. That's within the parameters of this, is it not?
Yes, there's at least two areas that I can think of. There's a built-in annual adjustment. And then when we come along and there's another development, we've already formed the district, so it's a much less of a procedure. We just have to annex that in. We have an opportunity at that time to revisit the rate and methodology, the RMA allocation study, and adjust the amount.
And when I was reading the report, it talked about an initial maximum amount, which was recommended in the larger report. And so it's funny, because when I hear the word adjustment, to me, adjustment means up and down. And yet, I guess I don't see an adjustment of down. I could see where there's an adjustment of 0 if we decide the following fiscal year we would not increase it, or is this increase, I wasn't clear if that increase was a mandatory annual increase on July 1. Is it mandatory, or is it?
It's what we're allowed.
It's what we're allowed, so it's not mandatory, it's optional.
I believe
in that
so.
sense. Okay, for that. I just, I understood the concept, and when it was presented to us, I was in favor of the concept, and I believe I still am. It's just, I don't know if it was that word all of a sudden tonight that kind of spiked my eardrum, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Because, is the goal of these districts, in a very generic way, cost recovery, or is it really something completely different than that?
It is,
And these are,
cost
I will
recovery is
say,
a way to put it.
I will say these are unfair questions, because I didn't have time to formulate them before the meeting tonight to kind of get with staff and talk about this. So I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I'm just trying to get a better visual, is what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, there's that fiscal deficit every
Right.
time we get a new home that's built. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And so you look at what the revenues are coming in from that property taxes, and then what public services we have to provide, and there's a gap there. So it's trying to make us, the government, whole.
Right, okay.
Stormwater is a really good example of that. We just have no revenue source to maintain, these storm drain systems. Streets and police services have to be expanded as our city grows. So, it fills that income gap.
Okay. Well, that does make sense, and maybe through the mayor, if the consultants feel they want to address any of these questions, we could open it up to them at that point in time. But I'm getting a clearer picture. I'm sorry, you have more?
Well, if you wanted a more complete answer, by all means, we can bring in one of the consultants to just let me know. And
I don't know if I need a more complete answer. It's still ruminating in here, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just something to follow up on as well. When we were looking at the slides and I had been reading through the report, we can't just randomly decide one year we're going to raise it 30%. There's a cap. We have to choose between one of two numbers and then justify why we would be making that adjustment. Is that an accurate assessment?
correct, back on the slide that listed the assessments, it's adjusted annually by the larger of the San Francisco Consumer Price Index, or 2%, but less than 4%. So there's a 4% cap, and then there's these 2% or the San Francisco CPI. And so that we just follow that formula.
Okay, and then if we're finding that it's actually matching what our costs are, we can just leave it for another year and see how the next year goes. Is that
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay, all right, thank you very much for clarifying that.
Do you have questions, Vice Mayor? No? You have another question? Okay.
Just a question of clarification. You said the San Francisco Consumer Price Index.
Yes.
It's not the construction index?
No, yeah. It's a consumer CPI.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So along the questioning that Councilmember Delasso had, in the up and the down, does, just again with this visual help, So does adding more to the district, does that have the possibility of then lowering the rate for everyone? Or does it always go up?
I remember attempting to answer this last time. It was, you almost have to see it as a percentage of how big the city is today.
Okay.
So if you're adding 1%, you're not going to really see much of an economy of scale. If you're doubling the size of the city, you're going to see an economy of scale. And so as a city that's mostly built out, I don't know if we're going to see much of an effect of that. So this is infill. There's just a very limited number of vacant parcels that are developable here. So I would think the impact of that economy of scale would be pretty minimal if it would be measurable at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, is there any member of the public wishing to speak on this item? Yes, George.
Council, if any of you are illuminating your thoughts about this issue, and you're asking good questions, I think it's fair to say that you're not in a position to make an informed vote. And I think questions are good. But if Mr. Scott can't answer your questions to your satisfaction, I think that's a red flag to write some things down, pull back, and make sure that you get the answers that you want. Now, I've spoken before that even though some good questions were fielded tonight, had you fielded those questions during the week to Mr. Scott via email or cell phone, he could have responded, or he could have went out and got more information from his sources to make a more thorough report. And he could have sent a memo out to each one of you that, hey, there is some concern about this issue on this recommendation, and I would like to clarify by this A, B, C, D. But that's not the way we're doing things here, and I caution you. I often like Mr. Scott's reports, but there's a couple good questions here tonight. This is a serious matter, and I would ask you, if this is not an emergency upon the city, is have Mr. Scott go back and answer those questions with 100% confidence and bring back your answers to your questions. That would be responsible government. And getting to the issue at hand about taxes, special taxes, special taxes, special taxes. We're looking at more taxes in Cotati. And I think this is a wake-up call. I mean, if you go back to the basics, if you want less of something, you tax it. It's a general rule in economics. And if you want to impose these kind of taxes, you want less build out, you want more hardship on the developers, you want more hardship on the new resident owners and so forth. This is the way to do it. This is how you keep Cotati in decline, behind the 8 ball, and a laughing stock of the county and the building community. And I caution you, this overtaxation and trying to find out different ways to explain the tax or word the tax so it passes is the public is taking notice of this. I mean, had you, for instance, lowered the tax rate on Measure G, instead of bringing in $400,000, you might have brought in $800,000 in taxes by lowering the tax rate. So please, keep this into consideration. Mr. Scott, thank you very much for your report tonight, but I think there's a little bit more work to do so that the council can make a really informed decision, and thank you for your questions.
Anybody else wishing to speak on this item? If there are no further persons wishing to speak, I hereby close the public hearing. And yes.
I wonder if it might be a good idea just to hear briefly from our consultant. They might be able to address some of the issues that were brought up.
Be great.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Nathan Perez, David's Housing and Associates. I was here, been here several times, but I was here on this matter about 2 years ago, and actually presented on sort of the groundwork for this, the fiscal impact analysis and the strategy, which this is the implementation of that strategy, so I'm always pleased to see when the loop is closed. Regarding some of the specific questions, the escalator one I could just knock out really quick. That's roughly going to be about 3.3 to 3.5% right now, given where San Francisco CPI has been for the last 5 years. So it's heavily hemmed in and hamstrung between that 2% and that 4%. We like to do that to make sure it doesn't really go crazy or it doesn't stay flat, but it'll be about 3.5%. With respect to going down, it's a good question, very good question. A little bit nuanced. There's sort of the practical reality and then the sort of technical legal authority that the council retains. The practical reality is that, you know, from a revenue generation perspective, from an equity perspective, you're typically going to bring new units online at the same level. It's going to escalate and you're probably going to just bring them in at the same level. Your fiscal deficit will continue to grow. Expenditures are outstripping revenues, so that's sort of the minimum, the bare minimum that you could do. Now, if the city were to receive an injection of funds or some other a grant or another revenue stream, the document, the rate and method of apportionment does allow you guys to scale back. And I would point you to the definition of special tax requirements. It's in the document, the RMA. We will charge up to the maximum that we've discussed until we satisfy the special tax requirement. Now, if other funds come in that help us satisfy that amount, we can charge less. You typically see that when there's grants or some kind of sales tax or ballot measure that comes in to sort of offset that. Or perhaps another kind of special taxing district, a larger CFD might come in and, you know, offset some of that. And that way the council does always retain that authority to charge less. And that includes maybe zeroing out the escalator in a given year or perhaps even rolling back a tax. So all of those things are within your discretion on an annual basis every summer when you administer the district. With respect to some of the other issues, you know, it's a unique animal. It is a landowner vote. The council is required to approve it tonight. It is a public hearing, but it is land secured finance, and it is the landowners, the Coleman Group, who are voting it onto their property, and then that will subdivide to their residents. So it is sort of an interesting distinction, an interesting realization of the council's role there. Is there anything else that I may have missed? Oh, I think the number is very reasonable, actually. I know new tax is always, I do this in a lot of communities all over the state. I know the difference between, you know, Peninsula versus ABAG versus core ABAG versus pushing up into North State. I'm driving to Sacramento right after this. I'll be in El Dorado on Thursday night. It's a good place to start. We felt that was reasonable. In fact, it's actually the fiscal impact bogey, our number that we came up with 2 years ago. We didn't actually escalate it because we felt that was sort of what was presented and what was agreed upon. And so there was no escalation or nothing was sort of rejiggered or reworked since then. That was what was presented but to council and voted on. So I think it's a very good number. I think it's you know, on the low side of the ones that we do. That being said, it's what the fiscal impact study justified, and that's the steps and the audit trail and the due diligence the city engaged in. So I feel very comfortable with that. I do. I'm not saying you guys have to, but I do as your consultant. So, oh, the building permit issue. Yeah. So I apologize. My wife and I had our third kid days before that meeting. So I do apologize. Typically, you see cities actually bring it forward to final map. So it's interesting. I know there's discussion of certificate of occupancy. Folks are in the homes there. That's far too late. And given the taxing cycle, you get one opportunity every July to put it on the tax roll. And if you miss that, you got to go all the way around. And if that homeowner's in there for a large chunk of that year and gets the tax bill the following year, A, they're angry. B, there's a disclosure required under the Mello-Roos Act that's required through the Bureau of Real Estate that every builder, whether it's townhomes or single family, has to disclose that to the buyer. And there's a disconnect when they disclose it and it's not charged. So that's something we try to avoid. Building permit sort of creates that appropriate lag time, so you're collecting money right around the time the residents are moving in, which is really what we're trying to accomplish, because that's when the residents necessitate the services, which necessitate the additional revenue. And that's the link we're trying to draw. A lot of very rarely, maybe 2 out of 100 times, I might see it go to certificate of occupancy. Much more frequently, we'll see it pulled forward to final map, which is even early in the process, which is even more risk for the developer, because they only have an entitled piece of property. They're not even going vertical yet. And so we thought this was a fair spot. It's what we do 90 to 95% of the time. And it also makes administration for the city the easiest, both from a cost and efficiency standpoint, but just because the timing works, because you're not surprising anyone, which we thought was very important. So that's how I would recommend it. 99 out of 100 community facilities districts.
I think the mayor's question would be one of the final ones that I can think of, at least the one where as more properties get annexed into the CFD, does that affect the service costs?
It could. I think the way it's structured and for equity purposes, we typically like to bring new development online at that sort of $600 rate or that $400 rate for apartment property. But there is that ability. There is that discretion as well. If there is a pot of money accumulating that's not being used for some reason, and the deficit perhaps isn't as large, and the service need isn't as large as we thought, we could certainly scale back to reflect that. We typically recommend the city do an annual report for the community facilities district, which shows that fund balance, which demonstrates, like with anything, with impact fees too. If it's being collected, is it being spent? I think that's a pretty easy baseline level of transparency that I think the city should engage in. I think that's something that we could help with. Give you guys some templates for it. I think it's just you just do it every summer, and I think it's an important part of the process. So, did I get everything?
Do you have any more questions? Yeah.
I do. I just want to come back to the San Francisco Urban Price Index. Being that we're sometimes considered a rural community, depending upon what particular index you're looking at, Medicare reimbursements are considered rural here, which is why we have some of the issues with primary care physicians and reimbursement rates. Is there a consumer price index that's more specific to Sonoma County that would?
I have seen some metrics. What we might have done is sort of do CPI minus 1% or something like that to perhaps better reflect that. The CCI, the construction cost index, is sort of more on the facility side. We tend to see than the engineering news record. None are coming to mind. I imagine that there's some that are issued by AVAG that might touch on that, but we've typically seen.
Well, my only concern on that, I think, is San Francisco can be very expensive, and maybe have a propensity to have a quicker jump in an inflationary index.
I agree. I mean, it's an excellent point. California is 38 million people, but there's sort of two major CPIs. They got rid of the significant detail in Sacramento and the significant detail in San Diego 5 years ago. So there's not a lot of great information. That being said, it is pretty hamstrung in between the 2 and the 4%. So I think that sort of smooths out any really aggressive hot years in San Francisco, hot economically, where you might see 5% or 6% or something like that, which is rare but has happened on occasion. So I definitely do agree. I think it's probably higher than a given community, but you see that in the way prevailing wage is set. There's just not that many BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics districts in the state that provide annual data anymore. So it might be a little on the high side. The council could always,
we do have
provide
that
something
wiggle
less
room,
than that.
and we do have that wiggle room if we decide that we don't necessarily want to.
In any given year,
increase it that year.
And I always just caution councils. Anything that you do sort of tends to become habit and practice, and there's this interesting habit of you forego an escalator in a given year, and 10 years later, all of a sudden you realize you've forgone it for a decade, and then you really are in a bit of a problem because you're 20% less than you were. So it's just something that you can track and monitor, and to the extent there are other data sources, you can bring them forward at that meeting.
Thank you.
But agreed, a little high.
Question?
Don't leave yet.
Okay.
There's more.
Sure.
So I was reading through the definition of the special tax requirement because I neglected to read all of the definitions in the back.
That's okay.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's a pretty...
Yeah. It's a budget.
It's not very complex, let's just say. I mean, the details of it, I'm sure, are. So I'm kind of going back. So my original question, which Mr. Scott did answer about the adjustment, I didn't see it as an adjustment because I define adjustment as up or down. And I didn't really, to me, it wasn't clear, but you've made it a little clearer that that is a possibility.
Absolutely.
I don't think any city council in their right mind would skip a year and go 10 years without doing something. I mean, every year, this is something,
seen it.
I can't imagine that. I mean, because every year, this is a line item in the budget in a sense. So you'd really want to look at very carefully at this. And my earlier question too was about, is this kind of cost recovery? But it's not even cost recovery. It's really not.
Agree. I could see I do cost recovery studies. It's a very specific sort of vocabulary associated with that. In this sense, I prefer the word mitigation. I think we're mitigating an impact rather than recovering a cost. I know, we can all go out later and discuss that at the bar, but I mean, whether there's a difference there, but I think legally what we are pursuing is that mitigation.
And that makes perfect sense. To me, where I was coming from with the cost recovery part was, it's a moot point because all of the services that are being provided and would be provided to this new district, is there a method to recoup what those actual costs are? And this is not reaching that. This could be a tool to get there,
Certainly.
but it's clearly not, because I think those prices at $36 a month for multi-dwellings and $54 a month is essentially the cost for single-family residence. It's not a humongous burden when you're spending several $100,000 on this particular structure. So, I mean, I think the questions that I had, I'm feeling significantly more comfortable. There was just a little bit of cloudiness for me there, but I mean, I've got it clearer, let's just say.
Sure. Yeah, and just the vocabulary I like to use is just mitigating that.
Yeah, no, I promise not to use cost recovery in front of you again.
Right, no, sorry.
Sorry.
Well, I just think of revenues and ball fields and
Right.
park rentals and things like that. But folks turned it on, and I have one district in the Salinas Valley. It's about 10 districts that for years they've turned off 5 of them. I'm going to get 60,000 phone calls this year. So you can do it. It's just that
Yeah, it only makes sense, like you said, if there's some windfall from
Right.
some other source of revenue that has come in, and yet that's probably only going to be, well, unless it's some kind of another tax, it's really only going to be one fiscal year. It may not be multiple years unless it's something like, like we have a 1 cent sales tax or something like that, but chances are those types of things are slim to none anymore, so, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? So since you're all over the state and you do this a lot, how common is this?
2 nights a week, I'm gone somewhere. I mean, this is a part of land use now. I would also defer to Sam Sperry as well, and a legend in the industry, and just sort of talk about how it's changed. But I mean, I'm not seeing communities without services districts anymore. I mean, I think there was a time, right during right before the recession, when you might have a bond district without a complementary services district, but I might work on 1 out of 100 deals that doesn't have a services component. So, similar feedback, or put you on the spot? Yeah, it's so, I mean, even ones with development agreements where it's not specifically laid out, it's just, Prop 13, property taxes 2% a year, maybe in any given year as they rebound, sales taxes may grow, shrink. We all know what expenses are well outstripping that. So, and it also becomes an important part of your sort of land use toolkit when you have conversations with people and developers, and it becomes part of that sort of impact fee, user fee toolkit, when you have discussions with folks. So, and we're seeing it across the board. A lot of community services districts using it as well, because they have the ability to access this as well. So.
Okay. All right. Then we will let
Perfect.
you.
All right, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that,
Mayor, if I might?
yes.
I held off on comments because I
Okay.
didn't really have any
That's fine.
questions, so I was
Okay,
trying to
that's fine.
really follow the process. But I appreciate the discussion and the questions on adjustment. But if you think about it, this is a pretty clear outgrowth of what we've seen in the last almost half century. I mean, since post-Prop 13, cities have been known that development creates costs that they can't really reimburse without either, one, raising taxes, which Prop 13 is limited to some degree, or rampant growth. And with days of rampant growth and most communities drawing back quite a bit, certainly in a outgrowing community such as Scotati that really doesn't have any room to grow. It's illogical to look for something like this. And I like the fact that we talk often about our lighting districts, and what's the problem we see with some of the older ones? These were created not having rolling costs built into them. So while we're fair, prudent, and thoroughly looked at costs 20 years ago, they did what they were supposed to do, they no longer do. What I like about this is, number one, the amount of data we have very clearly quantifies the costs, I think very thoroughly, and as fairly as you possibly can, given some of the vagaries we've talked about here that can't really be fully quantified. And it allows these ongoing costs to follow the cost of living to some degree, which is important. And it's a way for housing to grow and things like that. I mean, if we were to put off this sort of thing, defer this sort of cost, and go ahead and allow construction without this, as suggested, deferring that, it's worse later. The price down the line is more difficult for communities, and certainly in between, you're not providing the goods, the services, the infrastructure that people want. So this is just a mildly long-winded way of saying, I support this, and I completely support the concept of the adjustment part of this. I think it's a smart way of doing business. It gives us a way of making sure our costs aren't too much, but just as importantly, making sure that they're enough. So I'll be supporting that tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Okay, so may I entertain a motion to, oh, sorry.
I'm so sorry, and I
That's
may
okay.
not have heard this, but if I may, I would just like to confirm for the record that among the items that were received by the clerk's office, the landowner did return a ballot to the city.
That
So it
was
is
one of the
correct.
items.
We do have the ballot. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. So with that, may I entertain a motion to approve the resolution of formation, the full title of which was set forth in the staff report?
I would move.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Let that show a 5-0 vote. May I entertain a motion to approve the resolution calling for the election, the full title of which is set forth in the staff report?
So moved?
I would second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let that show a 5-0 vote. Moving next to the matter of conducting the mail ballot election, will the deputy city clerk please confirm that she has received a completed ballot from the sole eligible landowner and related waiver and consent authorizing the election to be conducted immediately?
I confirm I've received these items.
Okay. Then may I entertain a motion to adopt the resolution declaring election results? The full.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let that show a 5-0 vote. Let's see. As one last item of business, may I entertain a motion to introduce, waive the reading, and schedule second reading and consideration of adoption of the ordinance levying, easy for me to say, the special tax, full title of which is set forth in the staff report.
So moved.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That show a 5-0 vote. That concludes today's actions with respect to the Community Facilities District. Thank you for your patience in that. I know, yeah. Phew. Okay, so with that, we have introduction of an ordinance updating the city's claim management process. We have a staff report on that.
Yes, one second, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you for your patience. I finally found it. I was lost in the CFD item still. So,
I know the feeling.
Okay, so when the city was incorporated, we, adopted a variety of formation ordinances needed to sort of function as a city, this being one of them back in 1963. There's subsequently been a couple amendments to this chapter, which is Chapter 3.28 in the Cotati Municipal Code, which deals with claims, the claims process at the city. As you know, so we're part of a group insurance pool, REMIF, and REMIF recently got a new general manager, and so that general manager just started, but their liabilities and claims adjuster has already been working with all the different cities and recommending things to bring everyone into alignment. As a pool, you share risk jointly, and it's important as a pool that we all do things the same way, so that there's some standardization in how we all collectively do things. So that, so therefore, the city of Fortuna, for example, has, really unusual practices and exposes the pool to a lot of large claims. That would be a problem. So this is just sort of a follow-on to that discussion. For us, it's just updating our ordinance to make it reflect best practices in claim management. And the primary thing I'll point out, which is mentioned in the staff report analysis section, is that it adds that the manager or designee would be authorized to settle claims up to $25,000, which is the same as the contract authority. So it's not an unusual claims amount. Anything above that would go to the council for settlement. And in a bigger picture, I will say though that when claims are processed, REMIF is going to be making some changes over the next 3 years in how they process claims. But in theory, what would happen is any claim, like $1 or more, goes to REMIF for processing, and then the smaller claims, the claims below the deductible, would be processed. The city would have some involvement in those, and has had involvement in those. But when we get claims above our deductible amount, which generally is, say, $5,000, then REMIF, as the insurer and representing the pool and the relative risk of the pool, settles claims directly. And there are some categories of claims that would be not covered. There are categorical exclusions, for example, from the policies that would be decided upon by the city, just because it's the city's liability and not the pool's liability. And inverse condemnation is one of those types of claims, injunctive relief, those type of things. But it's a really small amount, a small number of things that are excluded by policy and would be covered directly by the city. So anyway, that's kind of the big picture on what this is about, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions about it.
Questions? Yes?
No, I have a comment, if I may, and maybe for clarification purposes. With the advent of the pool, a lot of the member cities had their own processes for handling different claims under a particular dollar amount, and some of them were reporting them to REMIF, even though it may have been their responsibility. And then other cities were not, because it was under a certain dollar amount. So it was really a hindrance in the data collection amongst all the member cities. And so with the hiring of the new general manager coming on September 5th, the REMIF board has been working greatly with them to get a consistent approach across the board, and then hopefully some consistencies between the member cities for ease of administration and efficiencies. And I think with the liability individual working on that now, it's going much smoother, and it looks to be a much greater processes moving down the road. So I just for clarification on that.
Yeah, thank you. And I will also add that the proposed ordinance was also reviewed by the liability claims administrator prior to this meeting to make sure it was in alignment with what REMA feels are best practices in managing claims.
Yeah, one quick question, just
Sure.
for clarification, if I might. So some of the changes oncoming in REMA in the next 3 years are more to making sure there's clarity and everybody's working the same way within the pool, as opposed to granting more control of REMA over the whole process of how claims are handled and what decision is made vis-a-vis an individual claim?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
It doesn't grant REMA any additional authority, it just,
That's good, because it is always a surprise for electors when they find out. In some issues, REMA actually will make some decisions that they may expect that they might get to make with some issues. So I think we have a workable system. REMA works well, but if there was something that was changing, I wanted to make sure I was not taking that the wrong way. So
right.
it does sound good to make sure that everybody's working the same page. It's hard to have a pool if you're reporting and taking different actions and have different processes and rules. So thank you.
yeah.
John, question? Wendy? Then I will open this up for public comment. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I will bring this back. Now, do we vote? Or is this just
This is
an introduction? So we
yeah.
do next time, right?
Right, just introduce it.
That's fine. All right, then, with that, find my spot.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, you have to vote to introduce it, yeah.
Yeah, let me.
Oh, well, thank you.
that's- I had it written out here, but then all of a sudden, it's
All right, okay.
Yeah, sorry, not a
that's
vote
kinda
for
what
adoption,
Not
but
a
a vote
vote
for
for introduction. Okay, thank you.
I
Then-
move
All right,
to introduce an ordinance updating the process for managing claims against the city.
and second. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, let that show a 5-0 vote. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. All right. Where are we? We are down to the regular agenda, and this is discussion and possible action to provide direction to the voting delegate and alternates for the 2017 Annual League of California Cities Business Meeting.
Yes, yeah, so I'll just take a start of it
Yes.
here. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So in the packet, there's a couple proposed resolutions that the mayor or the voting alternate would be asked to vote on at the annual league conference coming up this week. The first one is regarding implementing strategies to reduce the negative impacts of recent changes to criminal laws. And then the other one is local control for emergency medical response. Talking with our public safety representatives, there seems to be pretty universal support for these two in terms of background. I'll just leave it at that, but I believe in the past, if there could also be additional votes that are necessary that we don't know about right now. It's just another discussion item. Thanks.
Yeah, because sometimes when we get these, they have already had the policy committee recommendation here, and we don't have the benefit of that. That won't happen until tomorrow, I guess. So I'm assuming since the policy committee's brought these forward, that they may support them, but I guess my plan is to go see what their outcome is, but same with the General Resolutions Committee, then they speak to them. So, with that, what direction would you like to set?
If I might, I would just say it's good to hear some feedback from local law, because I looked at this and all of a sudden, this is a rather wide scope of discussion coming from just a few cities in another region that's not really tenuously at best connected to ours. And my first thought was, I'm not sure what can of worms I'm opening up here, because there's a few things. It's one thing certainly to work, to take a look at these issues and work with the league and the governor's office, fully support that. But there's also calling for revising definitions of violent crime, which may or may not be a good thing, but we don't really have the time, the staff report, and haven't reviewed that in such a way. And also data sharing, probably just fine, but I haven't heard both sides of that. I had just a little about that. I am fine with the second one. simply because I've seen that actually play out in our county. At LAFCO, I've seen in some of our coastal cities some mild back and forth between the county, LEM, and local ambulance providers. But unfortunately, our supervisor at the time, our new supervisor actually, Supervisor Hopkins, smoothed that over and seemed to handle that well. But I could see where that would be an issue. So I see that as something that could be a problem up and down the state, and I could support that. I would probably want a little more direction on the first one. But frankly, if everybody wants to support it, I'd be fine.
So can the chief add more input to this? Or does the chief not have any more input to this?
And Mayor, also you'll
Yeah.
want to take some public
I
comment.
will.
Thank you.
I will. Figured
Apologies for
everybody
putting you
would
in the
want
hot
to be
spot here,
informed
Chief.
before we do that.
Good evening, council. So my input would be on the first one we talked about. So, you know, I've always talked about AB 109, which is realignment, Prop 47, which decriminalized a lot of things, and then Prop 57 is allowing people to get out of prison early. And so there's some fallout. There's going to be increase in crime because of that. And the data sharing portion of that is to track offenders that are released. I totally support, you know, council and the league looking at whatever we can do to reduce violent crime in our state. And some of these things that are not called violent crimes are violent crimes, in my opinion. And so I did reach out to my Cal Chiefs rep, who is Chief Weaver from Sebastopol, and Cal Chiefs supports this also. So that's pretty much my input on that.
I mean, the way I understood this, it was really just to actually enter into a discussion, to discuss these items that are kind of have had these unintended consequences, and to see if there's not a way to take these unintended consequences and do something to help strategize
That might
to
be
make
a
that
perfect
better.
place. If we're
So-
this is just a point of discussion, there's no action taken as yet, that means there's another pass. So it makes it a lot easier to support something that generally sounds good, but we haven't had as much specificity for something that big that as I'd prefer.
My guess would be, and you can help me along with this, is that depending upon the outcome of the discussion, that there'll be changes or a new bill added, right? Changes, a trailer to an existing bill and/or a new bill to address whatever it is that comes out of the discussions.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. And one of them would be looking at data sharing, and the other would be redefining violent crime. What is violent crime?
Yeah, because some of these that kind of fell out as not violent seem kind of violent to me, but.
I agree.
You know, not having been there when they created it, I don't know what lens they used to determine, how violent is violent, so it just.
I kind of agree with the discussion. I kind of agree with the discussion, though, because the way I read the first 3 points of the first resolution was that let's take into further consideration, let's have a discussion or whatever it's going to be. So it didn't sound like this was finalized by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I was a little uneasy, I think the first time I read through it, because it's like, wait a minute, what did I just read? But then when I read through it a second time, it's like, man, it seems a little softer than that. And doesn't mean there won't be direction going where we may or may not want it to go, but at this point in time,
Right.
didn't appear to be.
Yeah, and one of the other comments that was made is, I guess, that it looks at only the last offense. And so, not taking in the whole, the whole person, the whole career is a little short-sighted. So if they, I don't know, did something, pretty minor, yet they've been doing all these other things, it just didn't seem to look at the whole picture, which I think was probably an oversight. But, what do I know? So, any other questions for the chief? Okay. No, guys?
It was a lot of information to try to
Yeah,
garner.
to
in
absorb,
one
yeah.
packet. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very atypical for one of these. Usually they're very short, specific, and something strictly city beneficial, league beneficial. These are slightly different. This is more like legislation a little bit.
Well, I think because the three bills kind of complicated things a little bit, and stuff happened that I don't think that, was necessarily meant to happen.
The law of unintended consequences?
The law of unintended consequences, yes. Okay. So with that, public comment, I will open that. Seeing no one wishing to speak on that, I will close public comment. And so what direction would you like to provide?
So, Madam Mayor, you are seeking direction that would allow you to entertain conversation around these particular subjects?
Yeah, well, if you go to packet page 144, kind of the actions that are gonna, if you look at the key to actions, it's approve, disapprove, no action, refer to appropriate policy committee for study. And we'll get, by Friday, we will have the voting in the columns from the policy committee, the general resolutions committee, and then I will vote on the general assembly.
I'll take a pass at this. Madam
Okay.
Mayor, I would suggest, or the direction I would just give you the direction to approve both items, but give you the leeway, the discretion to either disapprove or take no action subsequent to any changes that may occur after this meeting. So it's all on you. We'll blame you if we don't like it.
Thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So, everybody agree with that direction?
Thumbs up for the direction.
So in essence, you are suggesting that you're leaving it up to Mayor Harvey?
We're suggesting we approve, but if anything goes sideways, she has, and I count on her thoroughly, the ability to handle that if it happens.
Well, because the policy committee may meet and they might, decide that well, this isn't ready for prime time.
Some
And
unintended consequences
yeah,
will arise.
exactly. So they may refer it back to the policy committee for further study and not take action on it. That's a possibility.
If the likelihood, if the possibility is there that the committee brings it forward for a vote on that, are you comfortable with some of if it were very similar to this language in some of these?
I am comfortable because it's the starting of a discussion. I would feel less comfortable if this was the final, this is what we want you to put into play. I would be very uncomfortable with that. But again, I will go listen to what they have to say about that. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of discussion around this. And it may get pulled even. It's hard to say. Sometimes that happens. So.
Okay.
Yeah, once the discussion starts, it's definitely, I think, important for the mayor to have the latitude to adjust depending on the conversation in terms of how she votes on whatever comes before the committee.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
So we have the two specific resolutions here tonight.
Right.
But when they get into discussions, one or both, they may morph based on the discussion, and there might be something slightly different that's ultimately voted on. So that's why I'm just saying that it's important, I think, that the mayor has some latitude to vote as things might evolve in the discussion.
Right. So right now, we would have to allow for a great amount of latitude because the discussion could go in one direction, an extreme way, or another direction, an extreme way.
Could.
Good, yeah.
It could, yeah.
So, in essence, we're giving you that latitude to go any which way, if a vote comes up.
As a reminder to Councilmember Moore, it was a 5-0 vote up here to make Mayor Harvey Mayor Harvey. So we have given her that latitude, yes.
I'll try not to do anything crazy.
Can you define mayhem?
I think that's a commercial.
We'll keep an eye on Nixle while you're gone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, wow.
So that's a no?
No, not tonight.
Well, that was one of the offenses.
Okay, so With that, we will move to the city manager's report.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So a couple things. As I talked about at the last meeting, there was a DUI checkpoint. This was a checkpoint that was a joint checkpoint in the sense that two checkpoints occurred at the same point in time in different locations.
That was confusing.
Yeah, anyway, I'll explain. So the city of Cotati had a DUI checkpoint on East Cotati Avenue at the railroad tracks, and Rohnert Park Public Safety had a DUI checkpoint on RPX, and at the same day and time. So therefore, joint in a sense, checkpoints. And so these are the combined stats. There was about 2,000 cars that went through the checkpoints. Almost the same number of those cars were screened. 73 drivers were evaluated. 21 were evaluated for alcohol. 47 evaluated for their driver's license to make sure it's valid. 5 were evaluated for various other reasons. 7 citations were issued for being unlicensed. 2 arrests were made for driving with a suspended license. 3 were arrested for some other reason. And there were 4 total DUI arrests. There was 3 at the Cotati checkpoint and 1 at the Rohnert Park checkpoint. So it was a busy night, which was good, you know. And as you all know, SMART has started, and I go by the parking lot there in Cotati pretty often, and it's almost always full. So that's at least that's a good sign in terms of usage in this area, because it seems like there's a lot of use both in the lot and also kind of overflowing from the lot. And the county also informed us that they believe their safety improvements at the other grade crossings within the county will be ready, and they're expecting to implement the quiet zone sometime in November. So that's coming up. Also, just to follow up on an announcement that I had last meeting, the Sunflower tennis courts, they're moving along. All the cracks are repaired, the initial resurfacing is done, and the contractor is just going through the process of multiple layers of coating and then painting out the lines for the tennis courts. So that will be ready very soon. The Cater sidewalk extension, the kickoff meeting already occurred, and we expect the contractor to mobilize here before the end of the month to start work on that. So that's great. Also, Old Redwood Highway, next week we'll have the speed trailer out on Old Redwood Highway notifying motorists that we're going to start issuing infractions on Old Redwood Highway for driving a truck through off of the truck routes, designated truck routes. And then the week of September 25th, the police will be out there writing infractions. So we'll give them a week of notice, and then the following week, we're going to start issuing infractions now that the Wobbler ordinance is in place. And School Street path, we just started design on that. This is extension of the pathway from where it ends on West School Street down Richardson to the first bend where that road goes up the hill. I don't know the name of it. It might be an unnamed private street that goes up the hill there. So that design is underway. The lighting project, it's being finalized for bid right now, so I expect that to be out to bid here in the very near future. And that's, just as a reminder, that's the tunnel lighting for the tunnel on East School Street, lighting the pathways on McGinnis, from McGinnis to Marsh and Lincoln, and then also La Plaza Park. We already talked about the Creek Week cleanup coming up earlier in the meeting. So beginning this month, the Grayton Rancheria will be moving their after-school program to our community center. So they run an after-school program during the school year, and they're going to run it out of 2 classrooms, and it leaves it open for camps and other uses after, outside the hours of the after-school program. And then we also have begun our fall theater production of Peter Pan Jr. This is for 8 to 17-year-olds. We have 34 participants in that. And then Winter Sisters, which is the not Frozen musical. For 4 to 7-year-olds, we have 10 participants in that. And then On Monday, October 9th, from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., we have our Camp Katati PJ party for children on their day off. This is it's a school day off in the district, so that's why we're doing it. So they can come to our one-day camp to make arts and crafts, play games, and get outside time. And it's a great way for families to have a safe place for their children to go while they may still have to work. Even though it's a school holiday, doesn't mean it's a work holiday. So, October 13th, which is a Friday, from 5 to 10 p.m., we're doing our first Parents' Night Out, which is a chance for adults to spend some child-free time out, shopping, eating, or just relaxing, while we provide a safe place for children to hang out, play, or have dinner. This will be the first of a series of Parents' Night Outs that will be taking place throughout the year. So those busy parents can get some time to remember that they actually have a spouse. And then I mentioned this last time, Halloween, City Hall Halloween is coming up on Halloween. From 1:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m., the city is hosting a Halloween here in City Hall. And it's a great way for kids to show off their costumes and get a safe start on what I'm sure will be a sugar-fueled evening. So we'll get them a kickstart going on that. And then for additional classes or more information, you can visit the city website or call Ashley at 665-4222 or awilson@kataticity.org. And then lastly, there was a crime prevention presentation that the PD did at the Charles Street Village, and this was last Friday. And the presentation was on phone and internet scams. There seems to be a kind of a rash of them again. I know I've personally been getting some of those myself, especially IRS or kind of threatening phone calls that if you don't pay right away, you're going to be, foreclosed on or sued, something in that variety. And then also, I did a Rotary presentation last week, kind of going over our fiscal year plan. Basically the same presentation that you all saw during strategic planning. So that is it for now. Be happy to
That would be Richardson Lane.
what did I say?
You said you didn't know what the name was, some unnamed street. It's Richardson Lane.
Oh, the path will go down Richardson Lane, but then it stops it doesn't go all the way to the school. It stops at the bend where there's a T road that goes up the hill, and that's the one I was trying to say. I don't know the name to that road.
I think that's
Sure, it
still,
actually has one. It's still Richardson.
I think it's still Richardson.
still
The
Richardson Lane,
addresses are still Richardson Lane.
Okay. Yeah, great, thank you.
It's okay.
Questions for the city?
Certainly.
Questions for the city manager? I believe you referenced a play or something that's in process, and you referred to it as Peter Pan Jr. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct.
So Peter Pan is a child that never grows up, right? Rhetorical question. You don't need to answer that. And then the other one was the Parents' Night Out. You might want to just throw this out to Ashley that maybe she could try one of those on a council night, so while the kids are occupied, the parents would come to a council meeting. I think it'd be a great night out.
We want them to have fun.
Just an idea.
I don't know if we have enough seating for that. Yeah, we can try it. Worth a shot.
Did you have a question?
One quick question there.
How can you,
Very impressive
Up that.
report, a lot of good things as usual. One thing I want to ask about, you mentioned lighting coming up pretty quickly for the East School Street tunnel. Will we be getting perhaps the non-camouflage paint starting perhaps at the same time?
Yeah, Public Works, we've been talking with Public Works about it, and they're aware of the desire to pick a single paint color or cover up.
And if we're going to pick one, let's try and pick a good one, if we're going to stick with it forever. But yeah, I think that would be a big improvement. If we're going to give them the good lighting, it would be nice if it's possible to do both at the same time.
Yeah, the tunnel will be very well lit, so you'd want the paint to match.
That'll help with the artwork.
Right.
I think that'll be a big improvement. Thank you.
yeah, there was something in the stats that I saw about the SMART train. I did have the opportunity when I flew home to ride from the airport on the SMART train. It was pretty quick, and especially because it was in commute time. The only thing that I think that they can do a little improving on, and that's the connection from the airport down to the station. They need to do a little improving there. But I did get to the station, and it was a really quick ride. So anyways.
Damien, you said we did 2 DUI checkpoints at the same time. Did I hear a couple of weeks back that they've eliminated the Avoid the 13? Because of state funding?
That's right, yeah. So this is in the absence of that, we've sort of voluntarily picked it up as a county.
Kind of coordinate with other cities.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, so we will move on then to city council member reports. Want to start at this end?
Sure, I'll be quick. I attended the Hispanic Chamber had sent out an invitation to attend their event, and I had mistaken it because I believed it was just the Sonoma County Hispanic Chamber. It was actually statewide. So I showed up at this gala thinking, oh, there'll maybe be 100 people. There were 1,000 people because it was all of the different chambers throughout California. And it was the first time they had convinced them to come to Sonoma County, and I was talking with the woman who had instigated that. She said that was actually one of the best attended. So it was great. We brought a bunch of people to Sonoma County. They got to experience different aspects of what we have to offer, and it was just a great idea, and it was really well attended, and they had some wonderful speakers. So anyway, that was fantastic, and if they do it again, I highly recommend going. It was really wonderful to see all the people coming together, and their theme really was about building bridges, and a lot of it had to do with if you've succeeded in business, then it's part of your responsibility to turn around and help bring other people up with you, whether it's mentoring programs or different things like that. So it was just a really overall great event, and I was glad I was able to go. And then the only other thing I had was we had our Internet Web Ad Hoc Committee this evening. So, thank you very much.
Okay, John?
Just a couple things to report out on. August 24th was our last Ag and Open Space District meeting. We did lose a long-time board member for like 7-8 years, Kristen Thigpen, who was really, really great, and it was sad to lose her, but she's grandchildren are more important than Ag and Open Space District right now. That's great. But we had the seat filled as we were thanking her. She was leaving. We had the seat already filled with John McChesney, who for many years was an NPR reporter, so but has lived in Sonoma County for a long, long time. So, but also has a little bit of ag background. So it just seems like a lot of new appointees in the last 4, 5, 6 months have all had ag background, which is perfectly fine because there's also, and not that this is this side, that side, but there's a lot of environmentalists on the group, and there's even representatives from the real estate and other business communities, and then the 3 electeds that are on there. So it'll be good to have him. He was a great addition already. On the 1st of September, I did attend the Health Action Network meeting, and I'll be going to the December meeting. But they rolled out that plan, which looked really, really good. And so we just did a little minor refinement, and it looks like, they're taking it on the road right now to kind of push that. And tomorrow, I know...
So that might be a future agenda presentation.
It will probably be. It sounded like they were going to try to get to all the councils. But that was kind of undecided. Tomorrow we have our Ag and Open Space District XCOM meeting, so that'll be to go ahead and set the agenda. And I think you had mentioned about Smart Train.
Mm-hmm.
So on that ridiculously hell-bent hot weekend that we had not too long ago, when it was like 108 or whatever, we decided to take a ride, get our Clipper cards, and Jackie and I took a ride from Cotati to San Rafael and back, simply because it was air-conditioned, and we thought, well, since our house isn't, that will be. But it was a great ride, and to see that scenery, it's paralleling 101, but you're just, you're east of 101, and there was some amazing scenery, and it's interesting about the whole quiet zone concept, because a number of times we're driving where there's not even a cow walking within eyesight, and they're blowing the horn. I really couldn't figure that one out. There was no crossings anywhere, so, and maybe that's where they're going to take out their aggressions, and, okay, you guys are going to have quiet zones, well, we're going to blow the horn near, It was just really bizarre. I mean, there was no crossings or anything, but the ride itself was wonderful, and the ride back was literally standing room only. It was a Saturday, but it was standing room only in mid-afternoon, and when we pulled up to Petaluma, about 3 people got off, and there was about 40 standing on the platform waiting to get on. It's like, oh boy, this will be interesting. But it was a great experience. I think it was round trip $650, $750 per person, something like that. That's a reasonable cost. I don't know what the next step is going to be, but hopefully it'll remain reasonable and people will ride it and get off the road.
Just to add to that, because I was traveling and the train was going and I decided to take it back, I didn't have my Clipper card with me. So they actually have an app, and so I downloaded the app, and the app worked just as well. You buy a trip ticket from, the destinations. It allows you to pick the destinations, and then the conductor just comes by and looks at your ticket on your phone. So both work, so that worked out quite nicely too. You just activate it. So
I'm sorry, there is one more thing. For
sorry.
both council and staff. I don't know if anybody was planning on September 21, 6 p.m., the Parks Summit meeting, because I know I can't attend that, but are people planning on potentially going to at least hear what was the public comment that had come in?
yeah, Damien and I were planning on
Are you?
attending.
Great,
Yeah.
great. I want to make sure somebody could go.
Yes, we were
Awesome.
planning on attending that.
Thank
so,
you.
This way.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for attending one more meeting.
Oh.
Let's see, so I have about 3
Turn
things
your-
to cover. Let's do this. I have about 3 things to cover tonight. I'll start with the kind of good news and then segue into the largest portion, which is more worrisome news. So first of all, representing the Russian River Watershed Association this morning, I did offer some testimony up at the Board of Supervisors for Safe Meds as staff brought back a few points from their nascent plan to ask for feedback from the Board of Supervisors. And the main thing I went up there to work for was to make sure that as it's beginning to roll out, they're looking at certain numbers, what's a reasonable number of collection sites for cities, depending on the size of the city. And smaller cities under 20,000 may wind up with only 1 collection site, which is reasonable. But because so far it appears to be voluntary only for pharmacies to be in, what we see coming, what we're concerned about at the RWA is that many smaller communities might wind up with just law enforcement. And although we're very pleased to have law enforcement helping with this, the uptake is just not as good. People don't go there on their regular travels. Some folks don't like to go there. I mean, obviously the logical and best way is where you get your prescriptions. It's a great place to be able to drop them off. That works. So they were really open to the message we gave. I'm hopeful we're going to get the best result we can, and we'll see what we can drive with that. The other issue was sharps. Medical sharps, should they be contained in here? This was a late breaking. It's kind of a best standard, but it's only emerged in just, I'd say, the last 3/4 of the last year. So there was some concern. There's one large entity in Santa Rosa, a company that does have concerns because they provide sharps and it would cost them more. Ultimately, it did pass with direction to include that, at least for now, from Supervisors Gorn, Zane, and Hopkins. So it looks like that will be contained. I think that's a good practice, and it probably certainly fits in with the rest of it, so it's good. So that's good news. Another piece of good news at SCTA, RCPA the other day, we got to look at some numbers for Senate Bill 1, what that might mean in the next fiscal year for road repair and accountability, local road funding. If you look at 17-18, Cotati was at roughly 208,000. According to this number, in 18-19, we would be at 294,000 roughly. That's a substantial increase. But wait, there's more. Somebody asked if these were, how dependable were the numbers? They're from the league. Staff went back and checked. At the end of the meeting, they came back and said, actually, that's a little low. So you should see a good, I'd say, roughly a 50% increase in what we have to invest in local roads, which would be significant. Now on to the bad news part of things. There is a congressman in California who's a candidate for governor who has also filed a measure with the Secretary of State to try and repeal most of the measures of SB 1. I'm sure it's just an unfortunate coincidence that he has this measure at the same time he's running, because I'm sure that makes the work a lot harder, so I certainly feel for him. But there is some uncertainty there, so never know what's going to happen with a ballot measure. With that, moving over, the last thing I wanted to share with you had to do with the end of legislative session, and this is kind of Sonoma Clean Power / legislative. There have been, in the past few years, numerous legislative attempts to slow down, stop, or flat out halt CCAs, the existing ones, stop the growth of new ones. This year was really actually something remarkable has happened. We've had a highly organized, very intense series of what I would call poison pill amendments, one after the other, at the very last minute. This has been more than any of us would have expected. And I'm not going to get too deep into the woods here with all the, but bottom line, each and every one of them, while at first glance might seem reasonable, one way or the other they managed to either gut CCAs or gut any new CCAs from coming on. And if you take a look at what's going on with LA County getting ready potentially to come online, you can see the motivation. There's more to it than that. There's some big deals looking at the governor's looking at it, working perhaps letting control of our state grid go to a larger area, which might have some benefits, but unfortunately with it, we would also essentially lose the ability to use we would lose the ability to be able to buy our own power. What would happen is that essentially the decision would be made by the bigger IOUs. So again, I'm getting too deep here. But bottom line, we thought we had the votes to beat this because it was supposed to go through the Senate Energy Committee, and we did. Thank you, Senator McGuire, who's on there. Unfortunately, as of today, the Senate President Pro Tem, Kevin DeLeon, it bypassed the Senate Energy Committee and just went straight to the floor for a vote. Potentially today, although I've heard nothing yet, maybe tomorrow. So all I can tell you is cross your fingers and wait and see. There's a lot of uncertainty what this could mean for lots of people, certainly for CCAs, but a lot of other things too. Very problematic. So that's kind of, hate to end in a bad note, but we'll see how this all goes.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because we had our North Bay Division League call on Friday, and Nancy Hall Bennett said that it's possible that she may need to pull some of us because there's a lot of action happening this week for us to go over and speak to our legislators. So we may yet have, an ear of some of them.
I certainly hope so, and I would encourage if anybody has the time, if you get an alert in the next day or so to yet again, or anybody in the public gets an alert to talk to their senator or their assembly member, if you feel strong about the issue, I would suggest you do, because this is actually, I think, a little more serious than normal. I think there's a bigger chance of something happening than we usually see with these sorts of alerts. So,
John?
Well, you heard about the update regarding the REMIF and General Liability Administration. That's going pretty well. Our new director came in September 5th, so she hasn't had a lot of time yet. We have another special board meeting coming up on the 29th. So there's a lot going on there in the future direction of REMIF and creating greater efficiencies, so that's encouraging in that regard. The 14th of October is the Chamber of Commerce annual fundraiser, so we're looking for our Oktoberfest. Right. What did I say? I didn't.
You just
Chamber
said
Chamber of Commerce
Yeah.
Oktoberfest on October 14th. And of course, we're looking for volunteers. And speaking of that, I have to give a shout out. The other day I went down to downtown Cotati on Thursday to place an order for Oktoberfest stuff with one of the food vendors down there, and their ability to access Cisco foods for discounts, wholesale on there, and had the pleasure of walking around with 4 of the officers down there Thursday night, and not having experienced a Thursday night down there with college crowd, it was pretty interesting group of people, and I thought that the 4 officers that were on at the time were very professional and very patient in dealing with the crowds and all the different nuances that come with the different levels of excitement for people spending money in our community. But so I just want to give a shout out. I thought they did a terrific job, and I thought they were very patient and very pragmatic, and so it was good to see, and engaging, which is what we've been hoping for. So it was encouraging.
As usual, it's a new group, September comes in, and the first time some folks have been away from home, and they don't know exactly what the rules are, so they need to be shared what their rules and roles and responsibilities are.
I was surprised at the volume, and then according to some of the proprietors, it was actually a lighter night because it was the weekend after Labor Day. So many of them felt that they had spent their debit card money over the Labor Day weekend and didn't have a lot left for the next weekend. But even at that, it was quite a few people. I was quite surprised. I'll bet. Well, I have seen Halloween, but not typically on a Thursday night. Yeah.
So the only other thing that I have to add is on Saturday, Grab South had their first year anniversary. And so the chamber did a ribbon cutting, and the vice mayor and myself were there as well as Vicki Parker were there. It was really nice. They had a live lady singing, and they had special menu, and there was quite a lot of people there. I guess one of the things that struck me that was really nice was that there was a lot of families that came in, and I think that was really nice, because oftentimes, you know, we talk about the crawl and, you know, all that kind of stuff, but it was nice to have families come in, and the food was really really very good. So they are doing well, and they are very happy to be here. And with that, that's all I have for right now. I will be leaving in the morning to go up to lovely Sacramento. Yeah. It'll be good. It'll be really good. There's some really good sessions that look like will be happening, so that will be good. And we will then move on to public comment on non-action agenda items. George, would you like to speak? Thank you for your patience.
That's funny, there was a live lady singing, much better than a dead lady singing.
Well, that's, yes.
I beat you. I know, John, I got you on that one.
That would be hard, George. That would be hard.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on future agenda items, possibly. I'd like to take you back to about a month ago at your city council meeting, where council brought up a proclamation to abate a nuisance on Bert Lathrop's commercial property downtown. And we had a lively discussion about that. And going forward, I wanted to let you know, the next day after that meeting, I called Mr. Lathrop on the telephone, and I told him about the item that was before you the night before. He was pretty shooken up about that. He had the shipping container moved within, I think, 48 hours. But he did tell me, and I'd like you to contact him yourself if you can, that he never received a letter, never signed for a letter from city staff. So he was upset about that. He was going to come into the council and speak about it, but he had told me, as he's told me many times in the past, he did try to develop that property over the years, and he felt very frustrated that Marcia Sue and the planning department stood in his way, and he wanted to make Cotati proud, to bring business to Cotati and to develop that area, but that wasn't in the cards. It wasn't in the future. So going forward, I would like you to reach out to Mr. Lathrop and maybe give him a friendly phone call or email or something, and just thank him for cooperating with the city. And I'm not looking for any thanks. I'm always happy to help you with a phone number or something, but you know, I am sad to see that the city went that far to have a proclamation to abate a nuisance and maybe impose fines and recoup costs and so forth. Going forward, I hope we don't have to go there, but Mr. Lathrop was upset because he did want to act responsibly, and he felt bad that the city felt that he wasn't. So having said that, I hope we all try to do a better job going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other information received after the agenda was posted?
No.
Seeing none. Then, with that, I will adjourn this meeting if no one has anything further to add at 9:18. Thank you. What happened?
But to be fair, we had to wait so long for common and non-action items. I thought it was only fair to let the man have some fun.